Okay, so now we're moving on to siman mem gimel, which deals with going to the Beit HaKiseh, to the bathroom, to relieve oneself of one's tefillin. It's very interesting. I was quite surprised by the siman. We always think, well, of course you can't go with tefillin to the Beit HaKiseh, but actually, mi'ikar adin, it's quite different. We'll see why nowadays we don't really do this so much anymore. But mi'ikar adin, as we'll see, Chazal did allow to go into the bathroom with tefillin. Okay, what's the background to this? So the background is, the Gemara says as follows: Tanu Rabbanan barishona hiyu menichim tefillin bechorin asmuchin lebeit hakiseh, uba'in achbarin venotlin otam. So they would put it in like holes which were lower in the Beit HaKiseh, but then the tefillin got taken by the mice. התקינו שיהיו מניחים אותם בחלונות הסמוכות לרשות הרבים, ובאים עוברי דרכים ונוטלים אותם. So they put it up on the cubicles on the outside of the Beit HaKiseh, but then people would steal the tefillin. התקינו שיהיו החזן בידו ונכנס. Okay, so they made the halacha that you can hold the tefillin in your hands and enter with them the Beit HaKiseh. The Gemara even brings here an incredible story earlier. ומעשה בתלמיד אחד שהניח תפילין בכורין הסמוכים לרשות הרבים, ובאה זונה אחת ונטלתן, ובאה עתה לבית המדרש ואמרה ראו מה נתן לי פלוני בשכרי. Okay, this is a bit like Yehuda and Tamar. Okay, but here obviously it wasn't true. So she stole his tefillin, and then she wanted to embarrass this yeshiva bachar. I don't know exactly why, but she said, look, this is what he used his tefillin to pay me for my services. So he killed himself out of the embarrassment. So they made the takana that you can hold it bebigdo biyado. In other words, you put it in your beged, in your clothing, and in your hand. In other words, you hold it in your hand, but sort of not directly, but rather sort of covered with something with your garment. And you can go into the Beit HaKiseh with tefillin because of this. Okay, the Gemara even says very interestingly, later on, Amar Rabba bar Chana, ki avzelinan batreid Rabbi Yochanan ki avabay lemeid b'Beit HaKiseh, ki havanaki safra de'agadeta havayayvla. In other words, when they would follow Rabbi Yochanan, when we wanted to enter the Beit HaKiseh, so if he had a book in his hands, he would give it to us to hold for him until he went inside and came out. But with tefillin, even though he had his talmidim there, and he could have gave his talmidim to hold on his tefillin until he entered the Beit HaKiseh, he went with the tefillin inside. He said, why? Because he says, since Rabbanan permitted to enter with the tefillin, ninteran, here there's a question in the Rishon, what does it mean, ninteran? In other words, let me protect it myself. In other words, I'm allowed to guard my own tefillin. I don't need to be matriach you. Some say ninteran, in other words, it protects us when we enter the Beit HaKiseh to have the tefillin protecting over us. Okay. Anyway, we see from here that Chazal did allow going with tefillin into the Beit HaKiseh. In other words, because of the concern that I need to be shomer my tefillin, and the way to do it is holding them in your hands with a beged, and then you can enter the Beit HaKiseh. Okay, now there's another question. So therefore, again, as the Gemara said, if you want to go into the Beit HaKiseh, and here now we're going to get into a distinction. Why are you entering the Beit HaKiseh? Are you entering the Beit HaKiseh for what we call Gdolim, to completely relieve yourself, or just for Ktanim, just for urination? Okay, so if you're going in for Gdolim, that's for sure you have to take on your tefillin. Right, the Gemara says, for sure you have to take off your tefillin for that. You cannot completely relieve yourself with tefillin on. So that you definitely have to take off your tefillin. What about for just urine? So the Gemara says, if I just want to urinate, can I go on wearing tefillin without taking them off? רבינה שרי רבדה בר מתנא אסר עתה שביהו לרב אמר לו אסור חיישינן שמא יפנה בהן ואמרי לה שמא יפיח בהן. Okay, in other words, there's the machloket amoraim whether I can go in with tefillin just to urinate, And we passed in that it's us, or why chayshinan shema yifaneh behem or shema yafiach behem. In other words, even if I'm going just for urine, I might end up either having gas or completely relieving myself. Now here, the Gemara said, only asked about Beit HaKiseh Kavua. There's a Machloket Rishonim whether Beit HaKiseh Arai you can go into urinate. According to the Rosh and many Rishonim, I can even allow to urinate with tefillin on, where I don't even have to take my tefillin off, if I'm not going into a Beit HaKiseh Kavua. In other words, if I'm out in the field somewhere and I'm wearing tefillin, and I just need to urinate, I'm not entering a Beit HaKiseh Kavua or anything like that, I can urinate and I don't even have to take my tefillin off. Why? They say there's no gzeira shema yifaneh behen if you're not in a Beit HaKiseh Kavua, because you're just going to completely relieve yourself if you're just out somewhere nowhere where you're not in a formal designated Beit HaKiseh. Only if you're in a formal designated Beit HaKiseh, then Chazal made the gzeira that you cannot even urinate shema, you'll come to Gdolim. Okay, we'll see though the Rambam prohibits urinating with tefillin.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Maybe I missed the point, but something that is not so clear to me. So we say that there's no clear regarding the urination and the Gdolim, but for passing gas, yes. Why is that? It sounds very counter-logical, the whole thing to me. I don't know how can I describe this, but it seems to be very, very logical. Like if you pass, like you make something much more lenient, much more chomer with the gzera, and the chomer you basically disregard, and instead of bringing it to the same level. I do not understand
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, to really get into this, it's not in this siman so much. There are more simanim later on that deal with the definition of tzoa and with tefillah and this and that. But for whatever reason, Chazal viewed the urine as much less problematic. In other words, the gas, I know it's maybe a bit counterintuitive to us, but the gas, they sort of viewed the reach as representing the essence that is behind it, and that they viewed as more problematic than just the urine. That's one point, I think is. And also, some posts can say that, again, you have to change the mindset a little bit, but you're talking about times when they wore tefillin all day, right? For us, this is not so. Anyway, this whole business of, you wouldn't even think, to go to the bathroom with tefillin on, unless, it might be somebody who has like a catheter or whatever. But, for normal people, we wouldn't think to do it because we're only wearing tefillin during davening. But for them, that they wore tefillin all day, it could be, if it's just urine, some folks can say Chazal didn't want to be matriach you to start taking off your tefillin and put it back on, and that's why they allowed it. They were more lenient by urination. Not convinced.
I find it fascinating. What I could imagine is maybe I'm just thinking out loud that we say it also in Hilchas Tefillin everywhere that Toya b'mashehu is making it possible for the other. So maybe they thought that, but again, if you say that maybe there will be some toy on your baguette because of the passing gas, I don't know.
Yeah, I think with the passing gas, because it has the smell of tzoa, and the smell is really something very important. That's why they, as opposed to urine, that the smell is not as hard, not as.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. It's fascinating. You gotta love Chazal for this. I really believe it. It's amazing.
It's a bit gruesome to get into all these details, but
yeah, but it's just fantastic to try to get into their mindset to understand how they understood these things.
Anyway, so just on that point, so the Mechloket Rishonim is going to be whether in a Beit HaKiseh Arai you're allowed to be urine with tefillin. According to the Rambam, no, but according to the Rosh and others, yes. The Chazal only prohibited by a Beit HaKiseh Kavua because there's a Gzera Shema Yifaneh Behem, but not by a Beit HaKiseh Arai. Now, one more point. Even if I'm holding the tefillin in my hand, there is another concern, and that is what the Gemara says later on. The Gemara says that there's actually something where a Beit HaKiseh Arai is more problematic than a Beit HaKiseh Kavua. Beit HaKiseh Kavua, delei kanitzotzot shari, בית הכיסא ארעי דאיכא ניצוצות אסרי. Okay, what is going on here? So Rashi here explains there's a concept of ניצוצות. דאיכא ניצוצות הניתזים על גבי רגליו, ואמרינן במסכת יומא מצווה לשפשפן שאסור לאדם שיצא בניצוצות שעל גבי רגליו שמא ייראה כחרוט שופחה, ונמצא מוציא לעז על בניו שממזרים, כך אי אפשר לאחוז תפילין בידו. Okay, in other words, the issue here is as follows. When somebody urinates, it could be that the last few drops that come out, they don't come out the same force, and they'll spill on his feet. Okay, so you need to wipe those off. So because of that, that's a problem. If I was wearing the tefillin, this wouldn't be a problem. But if I have the tefillin in my hand, there's a concern because, again, according to Chazal, I use the left hand to wipe my behind, but the nitzotzot here Rashi says that I would do with my right. But if I have tefillin in my hand, I don't have a hand left to wipe off the nitzotzot off my feet. Okay? Now, this is dafka more problematic in the Beit HaKisei Arai than in the Beit HaKisei Kavua. Why? So here, the Rishonim say several reasons. Why is nitzotzot dafka problem in the Beit HaKisei Arai, not in the Beit HaKisei Kavua? The difference is as follows. Beit HaKisei Kavua, usually I do things sitting down. If I do things sitting down, it's not going to end up on my feet. As opposed to in the Beit HaKisei Arai, I'm doing it standing up, so the last few drops could end on my feet. Also, a Beit HaKisei Kavua might be shaped in a way. I mean, today we have urinals, so obviously that's good. But even in the past, they would shape them maybe on a slope, or they would have some sort of chafira or something to make sure that it would not, the nitzotzot would not come on yourself, on your feet, and it would come away from you. So if I'm holding the tefillin in my hand and I'm urinating, I actually have more of a problem in the Beit HaKisei Arai, and I shouldn't hold the tefillin in my hand then, because I'll need to wipe off the nitzotzot off my feet, and I can't do that if I have the tefillin in my hand. Okay, so that's why the Rosh, for example, would say that if I'm in a Beit HaKisei Arai, I should dafka keep the tefillin on and not put them in my hands, so that because of the concern for nitzotzot. Okay, with all that background, let's try and see the Shulchan Aruch on all of this. Okay, so he says as follows. סעיף א', אסור להיכנס לבית הכיסא הקבוע להשתין בתפילין שבראשו, גזירה שמא יעשה בהם צרכיו. So to בית הכיסא הקבוע, everybody agrees I cannot have the tefillin on my head, certainly not if I'm doing gdolim, but even if I'm just coming to urinate, there's a gzera שמא יעשה בהם צרכיו, so I have to take off the tefillin. Okay, here the Mishnah Berurah says it's both tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh. ואם הוא חזם בידו, מותר להשתין בהם בבית הכיסא הקבוע. If I'm holding them in my hand, again, as we said, you hold them with your right hand with a beged, but then you are allowed to enter the Beit HaKisei, then you can relieve yourself in the Beit HaKisei Kavua. And there's no, as we said in Beit HaKisei Kavua, there's no problem of nitzotzot, and that's what the Rama here says. Agav v'hainu dafka k'shemashtin meyushav, deleika lemecha shel nitzotzot. If I'm doing it sitting down, so there's no concern of nitzotzot. Avan mashtin mu'umad pshita de'asur. The law different Beit HaKisei Arai, but if I'm doing it standing up, so again, it's no better than the Beit HaKisei Arai that I have the concern of nitzotzot. והוא הדין אם משתין מיושב או באפר תחוח, דליקה ניצוצות בבית הכיסא הרי נמי שרי. In other words, if the dirt there is תחוח, in other words, that it's going to absorb and it's not going to spritz on me, then it's also fine. ואין חילוק בין קבע להרי לעניין זה, לדבית הכיסא קבוע מסתם עושה צרכיו מיושב, בית הכיסא הרי מסתם עושה מועמד, הואיל ואינו נפטר לגדולים. Okay, so the difference is that Beit HaKisei Kavua, usually you do it sitting down, and therefore there's no problem with nitzotzot. Beit HaKisei Arai, you do it standing up. So in the Beit HaKisei Arai, you can't have it in your hands. Okay, ובבית הכיסא הרי מותר להשתין בהם כשהם בראשו. Right, this is according to the Rosh. Then the Beit HaKisei Arai, you can leave them on in urinate. אבל אם הוא חזם בידו, אסיר להשתין בהם מועמד, אפילו אם תופס אותם בבגדו, מפני שצריך לשפשף בידו ניצוצות שברגליו, ולחולצן בריחוק ד' אמות ונתן לחברו. So if I do take them off, then I cannot hold them in my hands again because of the nitzotzot, so therefore I need to give them over to somebody to hold them on for me. Again, nowadays, if you have a proper urinal, this wouldn't be a problem because there wouldn't be a concern for nitzotzot, so that would be like a Beit HaKisei Kavua, so I would be able to hold them in my hands. מדברי הרמב"ם נראה שאסור להשתין כשהם בראשו בין בבית הכיסא קבוע בין בבית ישראל ויש לחוש לדבריו. So the Mechaber says, Lamaisa, you should be choshesh for the Rambam and not urinate at all with tefillin on your hands. And he says, Lechatchila, very interestingly, the Mishnah Bura says that לעת הצורך, כגון שיתבטל על ידי זה מתפילה בציבור, יכול לסמוך על דעה ראשונה, אך שייזהר הרבה שלא יבוא לידי החכם. מכל מקום נוהגים לחלוץ של ראש. So he says, if you're in a rush, and you might miss minyan, if you take off the tefillin, then you can even rely on the rosh and urinate without taking the tefillin on, but he says the minhag is to take them off. Okay, now he says, סעיף ב', בית הכיסא קבוע, היינו שיש בו צואה, והוא לפני השדה בלא חפירה. In other words, what is a beit hakisa kavua? That there is tzoa inside. In other words, that you just do your thing on the ground. If there is a chafira, in other words, they dig some sort of pit that all the tzoa falls inside, then he says that's not a beit hakisa kavua. And therefore, he says you can enter that Beit HaKisa with tefillin, right? Because all the tzoa is in a separate reshut in the chafira. But he says, nevertheless, if you're actually coming to do your trachab, then you still need to take off the tefillin beforehand. Beit HaKisa arai, היינו כגון להשתין מים, שאין אדם הולך בשבילם לבית הכיסא, והפעם הזה נעשה המקום הזה בית הכיסא תפילה. In other words, the Beit HaKisa arai is something that's never been used for a Beit HaKisa, just a place that maybe you would urinate for, but you wouldn't do anything beyond that, and that's considered the Beit HaKisa arai. ד' אם הם בחיקו וחגור חגורה בבגדו בידו, מותר בין להשתין בלפנות. If they're somehow tied to you, you're not even holding them with your hand, right? They're in a pocket, or they're maybe in a strap, connected with a strap around your body, then you're not wearing them. So there's no problem of nitzotzot either, and you're not wearing them, so no problem to relieve yourself, so that way you can enter the Beit HaKisa. I'm not going to enter the Beit HaKisa, but in that way you can relieve yourself. Okay? In Hey, he says, אם רוצה להיכנס לבית הכיסא קבוע לעשות צרכיו, קולצן ברחוק 4 אמות, in other words, you should take them off 4 amot from the Beit HaKisa קבוע. Take them off, in other words, not to, again, you are allowed to carry them inside, but you should remove them from a distance of 4 amot. Again, nowadays, if we have walls, so then we don't need the 4 amot. אגב, יש אומרים אפילו בלא צרכה וטוב להחמיר. In other words, even if you're entering the Beit HaKisa קבוע, not to relieve yourself, you should take them off beforehand. וגוללן ברצועות שלהן, וחזן בימינו בבגדו כנגד ליבו. ויזהר שלא תהיה רצועה יוצא מתחת לטפח, שיוצא מרחיק 4 אמות מניחה. So again, you're allowed to take them inside. You have to take them off because you're going in לעשות צרכיו. So you have to take them off. So you take them off, you wrap the straps around, you hold it with your hand in the beged, and you make sure that the straps don't come out, and you are allowed to enter with them to the Beit HaKisa. Again, we said for protection, because all the problems that they had, the people would steal the tefillin. Okay, now all of this that we said, the Gemara says, only applies in the daytime. In other words, when I'm going into the Beit HaKisa, but once I come out, I'm going to put the tefillin back on. What about if it's already nighttime? So once I take the tefillin off, I'm not going to put them back on again. So in that case, the Gemara says you should actually put the tefillin in some sort of kli before you enter the Beit HaKisa. Okay, that's what we have here in Sifav. היה לבוש בתפילין והוא צריך לבית הכיסא בלילה או סמוך לחשיכה, שהן שעות להניחם עוד אחר שיצא, לא ייכנס בהם גלוליל בבגדו, אפילו להשתין מים בבית הכיסא קבוע, אלא כיצד יצא הוא חלצן ומניחן בכלי, אם היה בו טפח, או בכלי שאינו כליין אף על פי שאין בו טפח, ואוחז הכלי בידו ונכנס. In other words, when did Chazal allow you to go with the tefillin in hand? When you're going inside to the Beit HaKisa, and then you'll come out and put them back on. So they weren't matriach you to find some sort of kli to put them inside. But if it's already nighttime or close to nighttime, in other words, I'm going to the Beit HaKisa, and by the time I come out, I'm not going to put my tefillin back on, then I should put them in a kli. What kind of kli should I put them in? If it's a kli which is designated for the tefillin, it needs to have at least a tefach space besides what the tefillin take up. If it's a kli which is not designated for the tefillin, then even if it doesn't have a tefach, as long as I have the tefillin inside, I can put it inside and go in. Here in the Mishnah Bura, he says that definitely if I have a kli betoch kli, then then for sure I'm allowed to go with the tefillin inside to the bathroom. Okay, so this is a nafka mina, I think, for us as well. Because often, we're traveling or whatever, and we have the tefillin with us, right? So certainly if it's in our carry-on or whatever in the bag, or even in the, like the tefillin bag, which is already like a kli betoch kli, then we can go with them inside to the bathroom. We don't have to find somebody to guard it for us. It's very common if you're traveling, you have your tefillin in your carry-on, so you don't need to leave the carry-on outside the bathroom. You can go with them inside into the bathroom, even though the tefillin are inside. Okay, because it has a kli with a tefach, it's a kli betoch kli actually, so that's for sure. Okay. Same thing if you have books inside, Sifrei Kodesh, all of that is permitted. Okay, here in Sif Zayin he says, "V'ben dvarim orim bebeit hakisa shebasade, bebeit hakisa shebabayit lo yachnisem klal, kivan sheyachol lanicham b'makom mishtamer." Again, all this applies to a beit hakisa which is outdoors, which was what the beit hakisa was in the times of Chazal. It was all in the fields. Nowadays, we have a beit hakisa in our homes, and obviously there's no reason to bring the tefillin inside into the beit hakisa. You would just leave it somewhere else in your home where it's protected. Okay, אם שכח תפילין בראשו ועשה בהם צרכיו, מניח ידו עליהן עד שיגמור עמוד הראשון ויוצא וחולצן וחוזר ונכנס. If you forgot to take off the tefillin, you went inside with the tefillin on, you forgot that you had the tefillin on, and you started relieving yourself, then you place your hand on them to cover them until עד שיגמור עמוד ראשון. Right, Chazal say that you shouldn't try to stop yourself in the middle of your when you're relieving yourself. That's considered to be dangerous. So therefore, you finish the first segment of relieving yourself, and then you go outside, take the tefillin off, and then you come back inside. סעיף ט' מותר לרופא לקח חבית של מי רגליים בידו ותפילין בראשו ובעל נפש יחיד לעצמו. The source for this is the tshuva of the Rashba. He says a doctor who has he's got tefillin on. Again, this was in the days that they used to wear tefillin on day. And the doctor needs to carry the potty, avit shel mei raglaim, whatever they would use to collect the urine. So even though it's not actual tzoah, it's just for mei raglaim, so therefore you are allowed to carry that with tefillin on you. However, he says bal nefesh yechid latzmo, better to take off the tefillin. Another point here in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings here a machloket achronim. What about going in what's called miva'ot metunafim? In other words, if you're going in the street, but it's streets that are very dirty, do you need to take off your tefillin? So he says it is permitted to go with tefillin inside to them. Better to cover the tefillin if you're going into miva'ot metunafim. But if you want to take them off and then put them back on after you've gone through, that's better. And he says, the Magen Avraham says that if you know that you're going to have to pass through Mavot HaMetunafim on the way to the Beit HaKnesset, or as the people often do, they would put the tefillin on at home and then walk with them to the Beit HaKnesset. But if you know that you're going to pass through Mavot HaMetunafim, then better to only put them on a Beit HaKnesset. I saw a machloket achronim, I think it was named between Rav Eliashiv and Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Nowadays that we have garbage, these big garbage cans in the street, is that considered mivot metunafim? I don't know. To me, it seems like a kolefi ainyan. If it's covered up properly, then properly not. If it's one of these things that spill over, maybe that wouldn't be considered mivot metunafim. All right. Any questions or comments on the Beit HaKiseh? Okay, very good. So we'll move on. We have 2 more simanim left. Let me just stop the recording and continue.